Daniel had been married to Emma for 5 years. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but lately, things had started to feel different. Emma was spending more time on her phone, laughing at messages she never shared, and coming up with vague excuses to leave the house. Yoga classes, meeting friends, running errands, each one sounded believable, but together, they raised a quiet alarm in Daniel's mind. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Emma's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it quickly, smiled, and turned it face down. Daniel noticed, but pretended not to. "Who's that?" he asked casually, keeping his tone light. "Oh, it's Claire," Emma said, barely missing a beat. "She's asking about the weekend plans." Daniel nodded, saying nothing, but he couldn't shake the unease creeping into his thoughts. Claire didn't usually message Emma much, and they hadn't even talked about any weekend plans. Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, while Emma was in the shower, Daniel saw her phone lying on the nightstand. For a moment, he hesitated. He'd never felt the need to invade her privacy before, but this time, curiosity got the better of him. He picked it up. The screen was locked, but a notification lit up. It was a message from someone named Mike. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Daniel froze, his heart pounding. He read the message over and over, hoping he had misunderstood. But there was no denying what it meant. His wife wasn't just acting strange. She was hiding something. He wanted to confront her right then and there, but something stopped him. If he accused her without proof, she could lie or delete the evidence. He needed to be sure. He needed to know the full truth before making his next move. That night, as Emma slept beside him, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A mix of anger, sadness, and determination churned inside him. He wouldn't act on impulse. He would be smart about this. If Emma was betraying him, he would find out, and she wouldn't see it coming. The next day, after work, Daniel stopped at a tech store and bought a small hidden camera. It was discreet, easy to hide, and could be controlled from his phone. Back home, he waited until Emma left for her yoga class before setting it up. He placed it on a high shelf in the living room, hidden among some decorative items. The angle was perfect. It would capture everything happening in the room. As he adjusted the camera, Daniel's resolve hardened. He didn't want this to be true, but if it was, he wasn't going to let her lie to him any longer. He would catch her in the act, no matter what it took. The waiting began. Every time Emma left the house, Daniel checked the live feed on his phone. Most of the time, nothing unusual happened. She'd sit alone, scrolling through her phone or watching TV. But Daniel's gut told him to be patient. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. Daniel's patience was tested in the days that followed. Every time Emma left the house, he checked the hidden camera feed on his phone. Most of the time, the footage was uneventful. Emma scrolling on her phone or pacing around the living room. But Daniel knew better than to let his guard down. Then, one afternoon, it happened. While Daniel was at work, his phone buzzed with a motion alert from the hidden camera. He opened the app and froze as he watched Emma enter the living room with a man he had never seen before. The man was tall, casually dressed, and confident in his demeanor. Emma greeted him warmly, her smile wide and carefree in a way Daniel hadn't seen in years. Daniel's heart pounded as he watched them sit on the couch together. Emma leaned in close, laughing at something the man said. Then, as if to confirm Daniel's worst fears, she placed her hand on his arm, a touch far too intimate for someone who wasn't her husband. Daniel's grip on his phone tightened. He wanted to burst through the screen to shout at both of them, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had come too far to let his emotions take over now. He needed more than just this clip. He needed a full picture of what was happening. The next day, Daniel contacted a private investigator. The investigator, a no-nonsense man named Steve, assured Daniel that he could uncover the truth. Within days, Steve provided Daniel with photos and recordings that painted a clear picture. Emma had been meeting this man, Mike, for months. Their rendezvous took place at coffee shops, hotels, and even in the park just a few blocks from their home. One particular recording stood out to Daniel. In it, Emma and Mike were sitting at a cafe, talking quietly. "He doesn't suspect a thing," Emma said, stirring her coffee. "I've got him completely fooled." Mike chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Good. The last thing we need is him snooping around." Daniel replayed that clip over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. Emma didn't just betray him, she mocked him, ridiculed his trust, and treated him like a fool. But she had underestimated him. Daniel continued to act as if nothing was wrong. He smiled when Emma asked about his day, nodded along as she told stories about her yoga class, and even agreed to her suggestion for a weekend getaway. Every moment he spent with her, he gathered more evidence, waiting for the perfect time to strike. His patience paid off when Steve uncovered a crucial detail. Emma and Mike had planned to spend the upcoming weekend together at a cabin in the mountains. Emma had told Daniel she was going on a girls' trip, but the truth was far more damning. Daniel now had everything he needed: the footage from the hidden camera, the investigators' recordings, and Emma's blatant lies formed an airtight case. But Daniel wasn't content with simply knowing the truth. He wanted to make sure Emma and Mike paid for their betrayal. The plan began to take shape in Daniel's mind. He would let Emma believe she was safe, that her lies were still holding strong. Then, when she least expected it, he would reveal everything. He wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. Daniel sat in his living room late at night, staring at the laptop in front of him. The files from the private investigator were neatly organized into folders: photos, videos, transcripts. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of Emma's betrayal. Yet, it wasn't the evidence that hurt the most. It was the memories that surfaced every time he looked at her face in those recordings. He thought about the sacrifices he had made for their marriage. The long hours at work, the vacations he'd skipped, the countless times he'd put her needs before his own. He had trusted Emma with his heart, his future, and his life, only to be repaid with lies and deceit. One photo caught his attention, a snapshot of Emma and Mike laughing together at a cafe. Emma's head was tilted back, her smile wide and carefree, the same smile Daniel had fallen in love with years ago. But now, it wasn't for him. It was for someone else. His hands trembled as he closed the laptop. The anger he felt was overwhelming, but beneath it was a deep sadness. He had given everything to Emma, and she had thrown it away for a man who didn't even respect their marriage. Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, the silence of the house pressing in around him. He thought about confronting Emma right away, but he knew it wasn't the right time. She needed to feel safe, to believe her lies were still working. Only then would his plan have the impact he wanted. The next morning, as Emma sipped her coffee at the breakfast table, Daniel forced himself to smile. He asked her about her plans for the day, pretending not to notice the way her answers were laced with half-truths. "Just a quick yoga session, then maybe some shopping," Emma said, avoiding his gaze. Daniel nodded, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband. "Sounds good. I'll be late tonight. Work's piling up again." Emma smiled faintly. "Don't work too hard, okay?" Her words felt hollow, but Daniel didn't let it show. He kissed her cheek before leaving for work, the weight of his plan heavy on his mind. That evening, when Emma was out, Daniel opened his laptop again. This time, he began organizing the evidence for something bigger. He didn't just want to confront Emma privately. He wanted her lies exposed for everyone to see. Friends, family, neighbors, they all needed to know the truth about the woman she had become. As he compiled the footage and recordings, Daniel's anger shifted to determination. He wouldn't let Emma walk away unscathed. She had underestimated him, taken his trust for granted, and now she would face the consequences. By the time Emma returned home, Daniel had everything ready. He greeted her with a smile, masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. She had no idea what was coming, and that thought brought Daniel a sense of grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Emma had made her choices, and Daniel was ready to show her exactly what those choices would cost. Daniel knew the key to his plan was patience. Emma needed to believe she was in control, that her lies had kept him in the dark. So, he continued to play the part of the loving, oblivious husband, hiding his anger behind a calm facade. In the mornings, he kissed her goodbye before heading to work. In the evenings, he asked about her day, nodding along as she spun stories about yoga classes and errands. Emma seemed relaxed, her guard completely down, convinced she had him fooled. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Emma brought up her plans for the weekend. "So, Claire and I are heading to the mountains for a little girls' trip," she said casually. Daniel raised an eyebrow, feigning interest. "Oh yeah? Sounds fun. When are you leaving?" "Friday afternoon," Emma replied, her smile easy. "We'll be back Sunday evening." Daniel nodded. "That'll be good for you. I'll probably spend the weekend catching up on work." Emma's smile widened, and Daniel couldn't help but notice the relief in her eyes. She thought her story had worked. The following day, Daniel met with Steve, the private investigator, to finalize their plans. Steve had already confirmed Emma wasn't going to the mountains with Claire. She and Mike had booked a secluded cabin for the weekend. The details were all there: the address, the booking confirmation, and even surveillance footage of Emma and Mike discussing the trip during one of their coffee shop meetings. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Steve said, handing Daniel the final report. "Good," Daniel replied. "This weekend, she's going to learn what it feels like to be exposed." Back at home, Daniel continued to play his role perfectly. On Thursday evening, Emma was busy packing her bags, humming a tune as she folded clothes. Daniel walked into the bedroom, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You're really looking forward to this trip, huh?" he asked with a smile. Emma glanced at him, her expression bright. "Yeah, it's been a while since Claire and I did something like this. It'll be nice to get away." Daniel chuckled. "Well, you deserve it. Have fun." As Emma returned to packing, Daniel stepped out of the room, his smile fading as he walked away. She had no idea that he knew everything. Friday afternoon arrived and Emma left the house, suitcase in hand. She kissed Daniel goodbye at the door, her smile warm and carefree. "Don't work too hard while I'm gone," she said with a wink. "Don't worry about me," Daniel replied, his tone light. "Just enjoy your trip." As she drove away, Daniel closed the door and locked it behind him. His face hardened, and he immediately grabbed his phone to check the camera feed. Emma wasn't heading to the mountains, she was on her way to meet Mike. For the rest of the day, Daniel prepared for what was to come. He collected all the evidence, the videos, photos, and messages, and edited them into a single damning compilation. By the time he was done, he had a video that left no room for doubt about Emma's betrayal. Emma thought she was safe, but by the end of the weekend, she would see just how wrong she was. By Saturday evening, Daniel was ready. Emma and Mike were at their cabin, completely unaware of the storm brewing back home. Daniel had spent the entire day finalizing his plan. He didn't just want to confront Emma, he wanted to expose her for the liar she was. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about justice and closure. Daniel uploaded the video he had prepared to a private sharing platform. The footage was raw and undeniable. Emma laughing with Mike at cafes, holding hands with him at parks, and their intimate moments at the cabin. Every lie she had told, every excuse she had made, was countered with evidence that painted a clear picture of her betrayal. He didn't stop there. He shared the video link with a select group of people, her friends, family, and even Claire, the friend Emma often used as a scapegoat for her lies. Along with the video, Daniel wrote a simple message. "I thought you deserved to know the truth about Emma." Emma returned home Sunday evening, just as she had promised. She walked through the front door with a practiced smile, her suitcase in tow. "Hey, babe," she called out. "I'm back." Daniel emerged from the living room, his expression unreadable. "Welcome home," he said flatly. Emma hesitated, her smile faltering. "Everything okay? Why don't you sit down?" Daniel gestured to the couch. Emma's brow furrowed, but she complied. placing her suitcase by the door. Daniel picked up his phone and opened the video, pressing play. He placed it on the coffee table in front of her, letting the footage speak for itself. Emma's face drained of color as she watched the clips. The laughter, the touches, the kisses, all of it laid bare before her. She looked up at Daniel, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. I can explain, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Don't, Daniel said coldly. I've heard enough lies. Emma buried her face in her hands, sobbing. It wasn't what it looked like. I never meant to hurt you. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. You didn't just hurt me, Emma. You destroyed everything we built together, and you didn't even care. As Emma broke down on the couch, Daniel delivered the final blow. By the way, he said, pulling up the video link on his phone, you might want to check your messages. Everyone knows now. Your family, your friends, even Claire. Emma's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with horror. You didn't... I did, Daniel replied, his tone unwavering. You made your choices, and now you get to face the consequences. Emma's phone buzzed incessantly as the notifications poured in. Calls, texts, and messages from people who had seen the video. She grabbed it with shaking hands, scrolling through the flood of reactions, some expressing shock, others cutting ties with her entirely. The confrontation ended with Daniel standing by the door. You need to pack your things and leave, he said. The divorce papers are already filed, and I've made sure you won't be able to take anything from me. Emma looked at him, her face a mix of despair and disbelief. Please, Daniel, we can fix this. I'll do anything. Daniel shook his head. It's too late for that. As Emma began packing her belongings, Daniel felt an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in months, he felt like he was in control of his life again. Emma had underestimated him, and now she was paying the price. Emma's life unraveled quickly after the exposure. The video Daniel had shared spread faster than she could have imagined. Friends who had once admired her charm and grace were now cutting ties. Her family, who had always held her in high regard, called her actions disgraceful. Even Claire, the friend Emma often used as her alibi, refused to speak to her. The texts and calls from friends and family were relentless. Some were angry, others expressed disbelief, and a few were simply cutting her out of their lives. Every message reminded Emma of how far she had fallen. She tried to explain, to justify her actions, but no one wanted to hear her excuses. At work, things were no better. News of her betrayal reached her colleagues, and the whispers and judgmental stares followed her everywhere. It wasn't long before her boss called her into his office. Emma, this is a professional environment, he said, his tone firm but professional. Your personal life has become a distraction, and I'm afraid we have to let you go. Emma left the office with her belongings in a box, her reputation in shambles, and no one left to lean on. Mike didn't fare much better. Daniel had made sure to include footage of Mike in the video, exposing him as a willing participant in the affair. Mike's own social circle turned against him, and his reputation as a smooth-talking charmer was replaced with one of a homewrecker. His relationship with Emma quickly fell apart under the pressure. The excitement of their affair faded as reality set in. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Mike disappeared from the neighborhood, leaving Emma to face the consequences alone. Emma tried reaching out to Daniel multiple times, leaving tearful voicemails and long text messages. Daniel, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but we can work through this, one message read. But Daniel never responded. He had moved on emotionally, and he wasn't interested in hearing her apologies. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Daniel, meanwhile, was rebuilding his life. He had filed for divorce the same day Emma left the house, ensuring she wouldn't have access to his assets or the home they once shared. He moved into a sleek new apartment downtown, a space that symbolized his fresh start. In the weeks that followed, Daniel focused on himself. He spent time reconnecting with old friends, taking up hobbies he had once set aside, and even traveling to places he had always wanted to visit. The weight of Emma's betrayal no longer consumed him. Instead, it had become a chapter of his life he had closed. One day, Daniel ran into a neighbor at the local cafe. "Man, I can't believe what Emma did to you," the neighbor said. "But the way you handled it, that was something else." Daniel smiled faintly. "She thought she could lie to me forever. All I did was show the truth." The neighbor nodded. "Well, it's good to see you doing better. You deserve it." Daniel thanked him and sipped his coffee, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. Emma, on the other hand, struggled to pick up the pieces of her life. She moved into a small apartment far from the neighborhood she once called home. The glamorous life she had enjoyed as Daniel's wife was gone, replaced by a humbler, lonelier existence. For the first time, Emma realized the full weight of what she had lost. She had traded a loyal, loving husband for a fleeting affair that had left her with nothing. But Daniel didn't dwell on her downfall. He was focused on his future, determined to build a life that was stronger and happier than the one she had tried to destroy. Months passed, and Daniel's life flourished. Free from Emma's lies and betrayal, he found himself thriving in ways he hadn't expected. His new apartment, with its clean lines and open spaces, felt like a sanctuary. It was a symbol of his fresh start, a life unburdened by deceit. Emma had tried reaching out to him a few more times, but Daniel ignored her calls and messages. Each attempt was more desperate than the last, but he had no interest in reopening old wounds. His focus was on moving forward, not looking back. One evening, as Daniel scrolled through his phone, a notification popped up. It was from a social media account he hadn't used in years. Curious, he opened it to find a message from an old friend. "I saw the video," the message read. "I just wanted to say you handled it with class. Proud of you, man." Daniel smiled faintly, though the memory of the video still carried a sting. He had shared it out of necessity, not spite. It wasn't about humiliating Emma. It was about reclaiming his dignity and showing everyone the truth. Emma, meanwhile, struggled to rebuild her life. She had lost her job, her friends, and the home she had once shared with Daniel. Living in a cramped apartment, she spent her days working a low-paying job and her nights replaying her mistakes in her mind. One day, she mustered the courage to write Daniel a letter. She poured her heart into it, apologizing for everything she had done and admitting she didn't deserve his forgiveness. The letter ended with a simple plea. "I hope you can find it in your heart to remember the good times we had. I'm sorry." When Daniel received the letter, he read it carefully. It was filled with regret, but it didn't move him. The pain Emma had caused was too deep, and her apology, while sincere, couldn't erase the choices she had made. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, choosing not to respond. One day, as Daniel walked through the park, he spotted Emma sitting on a bench. She looked tired, her once polished appearance replaced by a simpler, more subdued look. She noticed him, but didn't call out. Instead, she looked away, as though ashamed. Daniel paused for a moment, then continued walking. He felt no anger, no desire for revenge, just a quiet sense of peace. He had moved on, and Emma was no longer a part of his story. That evening, Daniel stood on his apartment balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand. The city lights twinkled below, and the cool night air filled his lungs. He thought about everything he had endured, the lies, the heartbreak, and the pain. But he also thought about how far he had come. He raised his glass in a silent toast to himself, to truth, to resilience, to the future. For Daniel, the past was a closed chapter. He had built a new life, stronger and brighter than the one Emma had tried to destroy. And as he gazed out at the city, he knew that his story was far from over. It was just the beginning.